What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine X-Men issue 120. This issue is by Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Glynis Oliver, Terry Austin, and Tom Orzechowski. This issue begins in Canada, where James McDonald Hudson, who we last saw about 10 issues ago, he tangled with a few of the X-Men in trying to bring Wolverine back to the Canadian government. He is talking to either the Canadian Prime Minister or the head of Department H. And Department H is basically the Canadian spy branch of the government. And he tells James, you bring Wolverine back. We spent way too much money on this guy to let him just walk out, so he is coming back whether he wants to or not. And Department H is not connected to the Weapon X program. About 10 years from this issue, a little later, we will get the official story of the Weapon X storyline in Marvel Comics Presents, as told by Barry Windsor Smith. And the Weapon X organization is not in any way affiliated with Alpha Flight or Department H or the Canadian government. They were a rogue branch that they were entirely acting on their own. They did have a sinister figure funding them, but they were not affiliated with the official Canadian government. So when this guy says that they have spent a lot of money on Wolverine, he means training him and I guess getting him where he wasn't quite so much of a psycho who will cut your head off just as soon as look at you, and turning him into a little bit more of a secret agent that they could actually use. So that is what this guy is referring to, not the Weapon X program that bonded the adamantium to his skeleton and gave him, as of this point, gave him the claws. Later we find out that he had claws all along, but that is not in the works behind the scenes at this point. James, who has changed his name. The last time we saw him, he was calling himself Weapon Alpha. Now, at one point, someone calls him Vindicator. Personally, I like the name Weapon Alpha a little bit better than Vindicator. Later on, he will change his name again to Guardian. I think Guardian is a little better than Vindicator. When you are calling yourself Vindicator, what are you vindicating? Vindication is an actual term. It actually has a meaning behind it. So if you think, oh, this sounds cool, I'll call my superhero Vindicator, why? What does that mean? It's kind of like the Avengers. When they first called themselves the Avengers, they weren't avenging anything in particular. I think in order of best to worst, Weapon Alpha, Guardian, and then Vindicator. Vindicator, it'd be fine if you had someone who had something that they needed to vindicate, but that is not really what's going on with James McDonald Hudson, at least not in my opinion. Anyway, he says, okay, I'm going to go bring Wolverine back. I'm not going to fail like I did last time. I'm going to bring all of Alpha Flight with me. And Alpha Flight here is Sasquatch, Northstar, Aurora, and Shaman, and then also Vindicator. And we get to see them at first in their civilian identities, and then it slowly eases you into showing them in their superhero identities, which I think is pretty cool, because the way this issue frames them, they are villains. It's not like misunderstood heroes who have a good reason for doing what they're doing. When they first show up at the airport in Canada where the X-Men land, they've caused a storm, Shaman has, and they are ready to attack an airplane with civilians inside. And Vindicator says, Wolverine, if you don't surrender, I can't be held responsible for what happens. So these guys are not heroes. Later, Wolverine says, don't worry guys, they're not villains, they were what I am. They're Canadian secret agents. But they're not acting heroic. Later, Vindicator does seem to have some concern over this situation getting out of control. At one point, he busts right into the middle of a mall that Storm and Banshee are in to try and capture them, and Storm attacks him, and Banshee tries to attack him, and as you remember from the previous issue, Banshee's sonic scream powers are on the fritz, because he used them to their limit to fight Moses Magnum, and so now he doesn't have the use of his powers anymore. So he doubles over in pain, and Vindicator does seem concerned at Banshee's health and well-being. But when you tell someone, I'm going to attack you and your friends, if you don't do what I say, I can't be held responsible. And then Sasquatch, this moron, takes the plane and throws it into a building, and many innocent people could have died if the plane wasn't almost out of fuel. So yeah, Alpha Flight, they're not great here. The issue wants you to think, oh, these guys are good guys, they are just being told you have to bring Wolverine back. But then their actions still paint them as villains. And you can say, well, Sasquatch didn't know what he was doing, he still This is very early in him being Sasquatch. I don't care. Innocent people still could have died. They knew that the X-Men were not alone on this plane, that there was a pilot who is not an X-Man, Colleen Wing, also not an X-Man. So when the Canadian government says you bring back Wolverine, there's still a lot of people here who could have been hurt because of Alpha Flight being very reckless. But then the X-Men, they are able to escape when Sasquatch moronically crashes this plane, and then they split up, and at one point, Banshee and Storm, they go to a mall, and that's where they meet up with Vindicator once again. And it's really weird because Banshee is thinking to himself, like, now's not the time to be shopping, but we need to disguise Aurora because of her hair. She is very easy to spot in a crowd. And then Aurora comes out of the dressing room and her hair isn't covered. And so I'm thinking, okay, what was the point of you shopping for clothes if you're not going to actually disguise yourself? Later, she does have her hair kind of covered up, but this seemed like it was just an excuse for John Byrne to draw Storm in a different outfit, it seems to me. But then Nightcrawler gets attacked by Northstar and Aurora, and then Sasquatch attacks Wolverine, and then what's left of the X-Men, they rendezvous together, and then Cyclops says, I don't care if these guys are Canadian superheroes, we're getting our people back, even if it means over their dead bodies. So Cyclops, he's kind of getting a little bit angry here. Usually the X-Men aren't going to set out to kill somebody, but this isn't the first time. Whenever Jean Grey first came out of Jamaica Bay screaming, I am life, I am fire, I am Phoenix, Cyclops threatened to murder Nightcrawler if he got in his way in trying to go to Jean. So Cyclops normally kind of meek and timid, at least he has that portrayal. He kind of puts up a facade, if you will, but you come after one of his own, he's not going to be happy. So pretty good cliffhanger. I can't wait to see how the X-Men in a reduced force are going to go after all of Alpha Flight. In the past, you had Colossus, Banshee, Storm, and Wolverine. All were able to hold their own against Weapon Alpha, and he ran away saying, I can't handle all of these guys, but now you have all of Alpha Flight going against about that many X-Men. So this is going to be exciting. I can't wait to see what happens in the next issue. So that's about it. There was, at one point, Wolverine is thinking about, I wonder if Crazy Rosa still has her social club. And he says, I was a wild kid back then. So what do I think I'm doing falling in love with Mariko? So very clearly, Wolverine does remember his past. That is something that when you get to the Larry Hama Wolverine run in the 90s, he does not remember his past. Very clearly, in these X-Men books, they intended for Wolverine to know his past. He just doesn't share it willingly with the other X-Men. It takes a few pages for Cyclops to kind of badger Wolverine and say, what's going on? Who are these people? Tell me. And Wolverine a couple times says, it's my fight, until he finally says, okay, these guys are Alpha Flight. I don't really know much about them. Also, that is a retcon that I don't know, or it will kind of be retcon later, where Wolverine did lead a version of Alpha Flight before he left the Canadian government, but most of the people that were in his team are not here. It was a bunch of other characters who either didn't go on to show up in other comics, or they would show up later on in the Alpha Flight series, but Wolverine says he doesn't know most of these guys, and I think maybe that is true later on. Much later in the Alpha Flight series, you will find out that he does know Puck, who is not here in this issue, but pretty much in this group, he only knows James McDonald Hudson. And I think that's about it. So in the meantime, I will see you guys in the future with another issue, so let's consider this one examined.